Hi, I'm Madison, and 3 weeks ago my sister Olivia looked me dead in the eye and said, "It's just fabric, Maddie. Stop being so dramatic." She was talking about my wedding dress, the one I'd saved for 2 years to buy, the one that took me 6 months to find, the one that made me cry happy tears when I first put it on. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. She wanted to borrow it for her Instagram photo shoot with some photographer she'd met at a coffee shop. Not her wedding, not even an engagement shoot. A photo shoot to boost her social media following because she was trying to become an influencer. And when I said no, she called me selfish and petty. She said I was being ridiculous over a piece of clothing that would just hang in my closet collecting dust anyway. But this wasn't really about the dress. This was about a pattern that had been building for years, and I was finally seeing it clearly. The dress was just the breaking point. I'm sitting in my car right now, outside the bridal boutique where I bought that dress 18 months ago. The same boutique where Olivia had rolled her eyes when I showed her the price tag, where she'd said, "You're seriously spending that much on something you'll wear once?" Where she'd made me feel guilty for wanting something beautiful for the most important day of my life. The receipt is in my hand. $4,750. I'd worked overtime for 6 months to afford it. I'd skipped dinners out with friends, canceled weekend trips, and ate ramen for weeks just to make this happen. And she called it just fabric. What happened next changed everything. Not just between us, but in my entire family. Because when I finally stood my ground, when I finally said no and meant it, the mask came off. And what I saw underneath was uglier than I'd ever imagined. Let me start from the beginning. 3 weeks ago, I was at my parents' house for Sunday dinner. It was supposed to be a celebration. My fiancé, Jake, and I had just finalized our wedding venue, and Mom had made her famous lasagna to mark the occasion. The whole family was there. My parents, David and Carol, my older brother Marcus with his wife Jenny, and Olivia with her boyfriend of the month, some guy named Tyler who spent the entire meal scrolling through his phone. We were in the middle of dessert when Olivia suddenly perked up. She'd been unusually quiet all evening, which should have been my first warning sign. Olivia was never quiet unless she was planning something. "So, Maddie," she said, setting down her fork and leaning forward with that smile she used when she wanted something. "I have the most amazing opportunity. You know how I've been working on building my Instagram following? Well, I met this incredible photographer at Starbucks yesterday, and he wants to do a styled shoot with me, like a real professional one." I nodded politely, already sensing where this was going. Olivia had been talking about becoming an influencer for months, jumping from one opportunity to another. Last month, she started a YouTube channel about sustainable living, despite the fact that she bought fast fashion constantly and threw away perfectly good food. The month before that, it was launching a podcast about relationships, even though she'd never kept a boyfriend longer than 3 months. "That's nice, Liv," I said, hoping to keep the conversation moving. "When is it?" "Next weekend," she said, and her smile got wider. "And here's the best part. He specializes in bridal photography. Isn't that perfect?" I told him about your gorgeous dress, and he's so excited to work with it. High-end bridal wear is exactly what he needs for his portfolio. The room went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a family enjoying dessert together, but the tense quiet that happens right before someone says something they can't take back. "My dress?" I said slowly. "Your wedding dress," she clarified, as if I was confused. "The one hanging in your closet. I figured since you're not getting married for another 8 months, and it's just sitting there, it would be perfect for the shoot. Tyler knows someone who knows someone at Vogue, and if the photos are good enough, they might actually get published. Can you imagine? Your dress could be in Vogue." I stared at her. Around the table, I could see everyone else's faces. Mom looked uncomfortable. Dad was studying his coffee cup intently, And Marcus was doing that thing where he pretended to be invisible whenever family drama started brewing. "Olivia," I said carefully, "that dress cost me almost $5,000. I saved for months to buy it. It's not just sitting in my closet, it's being preserved for my wedding." She waved her hand dismissively. "I know it was expensive. That's exactly why it would be perfect for the shoot. The photographer said he needed something that screams luxury, and I promise I'll be super careful with it. It's not like I'm going to ruin it or anything." "But what if something happens to it?" I asked. "What if it gets torn or stained or damaged? Then what?" Olivia's expression shifted slightly. The sweet, pleading look was replaced by something harder. "Nothing's going to happen to it, Maddie. God, you're being so paranoid. It's just one afternoon, a few hours of photos, and then I'll have it dry cleaned and returned to you good as new." "But why my dress?" I pressed. "Why can't you rent one or buy your own?" "Because I don't have $5,000 to spend on a dress I'll wear once," she snapped, her mask slipping further. "And rental places don't have anything nearly as nice as yours." "Come on, Maddie. This could be huge for me. This could be the break I've been waiting for." I looked around the table again. Mom was now actively avoiding eye contact, and Dad was getting up to refill his coffee even though his cup was still half full. Marcus was texting someone, probably his wife who was in the kitchen cleaning up. "Olivia, I can't. I'm sorry, but I just can't risk something happening to my wedding dress." That's when her face changed completely. The pleading expression disappeared, and what replaced it was pure entitlement mixed with barely controlled anger. "Are you serious right now?" she said, her voice getting louder. "You're going to ruin this opportunity for me over a dress? A dress that you've worn exactly 0 times, and that's going to sit in your closet for the next 8 months doing absolutely nothing?" "It's not just a dress, Liv. It's my wedding dress. It's special to me." "Special?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Maddie, it's fabric. It's thread and beads and whatever else they put on there. It's not like it's some family heirloom or something. You bought it at a store. It's not irreplaceable." The room had gone completely silent now. Even Tyler had looked up from his phone to watch the show. "Just because I bought it at a store doesn't mean it's not special to me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I chose every detail of that dress. I tried on hundreds of dresses before I found the right one. I worked extra shifts for months to afford it. It represents something important to me." "What it represents," Olivia said, standing up from the table, "is you being selfish. As usual. You have this beautiful, expensive dress that you're not even using, and you won't let me borrow it for one afternoon. One afternoon that could change my entire career." "Your career?" I couldn't help myself. "Olivia, you don't have a career. You've been unemployed for 3 months, and before that you quit your job at the marketing firm because you said your boss was stifling your creativity. You're 26 years old and you've never held a job for more than 6 months." I regretted the words as soon as they left my mouth, but I couldn't take them back. Olivia's face turned red, and I could see her hands shaking with anger. "At least I'm trying to do something with my life," she shot back. "At least I'm not just settling for some boring corporate job and a boring corporate husband and a boring corporate life. Some of us have bigger dreams than becoming a suburban housewife." That hit harder than I expected. Jake and I had been together for 4 years, and he was the kindest, most supportive person I'd ever met. He worked as a software engineer, and yes, it was a stable, traditional job, but it was also work he was passionate about. And I loved my job in marketing. It wasn't glamorous, but it was fulfilling, and it paid well, and it allowed me to have the life I wanted. "There's nothing wrong with wanting stability," I said quietly. "There's nothing wrong with wanting more," she countered. "But I guess you wouldn't understand that. You've always been content with mediocre." The word hung in the air like a slap. Mediocre. She'd called my life, my choices, my fiancé, mediocre. "Olivia," Dad said suddenly, his voice sharp, "that's enough." But she wasn't done. No, Dad, it's not enough. I'm tired of Maddie acting like she's better than everyone else. She gets engaged and suddenly she thinks she's princess perfect too. Good to help her own sister. Well, newsflash, Maddie. Your life isn't that special. Your dress isn't that special. And your precious wedding isn't going to be that special either. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the dishwasher running in the kitchen, the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. I think you should leave, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Fine, Olivia said, grabbing her purse. But don't come crying to me when you realize what you've missed out on. And don't expect me to pretend to be excited about your boring wedding either. She stormed out, Tyler trailing behind her, looking confused and uncomfortable. The front door slammed so hard that Mom's china cabinet rattled. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the empty chair where my sister had been sitting. My parents were looking at each other with that expression married couples get when they're having an entire conversation without words. Marcus was still texting, but I could tell he was listening. She didn't mean it, Mom said finally. She's just disappointed. You know how she gets when she's disappointed. But I did know how she got when she was disappointed. And that was exactly the problem. As I drove home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. It wasn't just the words, she'd said, though those had hurt. It was the assumption. The complete and total assumption that my things were her things. That my wedding dress was something she could just borrow like a sweater or a pair of shoes. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. It was the way she'd looked at me when I said no. Like I was being unreasonable. Like I was the one in the wrong. Like my wedding dress, the dress I'd dreamed about and saved for and carefully chosen, was just some random piece of fabric that I was hoarding for no good reason. That night, I pulled the dress out of the closet and looked at it hanging there in its preservation bag. It was a soft ivory color with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing skirt that made me feel like a princess when I tried it on. The bodice was covered in tiny seed pearls that caught the light when I moved. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever owned, and when I put it on, I felt like the best version of myself. I thought about Olivia's words. It's just fabric. But it wasn't just fabric. It was hope and dreams, and the future I was building with Jake. It was 6 months of searching, and 2 years of saving. It was the feeling of finally finding something perfect, something that was exactly right. And she wanted to borrow it for a photo shoot. Not her wedding, not even her engagement. A photo shoot for Instagram. I hung the dress back up and closed the closet door. I thought that was the end of it. I thought Olivia would cool down, maybe even apologize, and we'd move on like we always did. I was wrong. 3 days later, I came home from work to find a voicemail on my phone. It was from Mom. Hi, honey, it's me. I just wanted to call and see if you'd thought any more about Olivia's request. I know you two had words the other night, but I really think you should consider it. This photographer opportunity could be really good for her, and it would only be for a few hours. She's been so excited about it, and I hate to see her disappointed. Maybe you could call her and work something out? Love you. I stared at the phone in disbelief. Work something out? I'd already said no. I'd explained why I said no. And now Mom was calling to ask me to reconsider? The next day, I got a text from Marcus. Liv asked me to talk to you about the dress thing. Can you just let her borrow it? She's driving Mom and Dad crazy, and it would make everyone's life easier. Everyone's life is easier. Not what was right, not what was fair. What would be easier? That's when I realized this wasn't just about Olivia. This was about a family dynamic that had been in place for years, and I was just now seeing it clearly. Olivia wanted something, and everyone else was expected to make it happen. Her disappointment was everyone else's problem to solve, but not this time. This time, I was going to stand my ground. And what happened next proved that I was right to do it, because the dress wasn't just fabric, and this wasn't just about a photo shoot. This was about respect and boundaries, and the difference between asking for a favor and demanding something that isn't yours. The breaking point had been reached, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to back down. It wasn't just this one time with the dress. As I sat in my living room that evening, staring at my phone and the messages from Mom and Marcus, memories started flooding back. Instances I'd pushed aside, moments I'd excused, patterns I'd been blind to for years. The first real red flag should have been my college graduation party. I was 22, fresh out of state university with a degree in marketing and a job offer from a mid-sized firm in the city. My parents had offered to throw me a small celebration at their house. Nothing fancy, just family and a few close friends. I was excited. It felt like a milestone, a real achievement worth celebrating. 2 days before the party, Olivia came to me with tears in her eyes. She was 19 then, still figuring out her path, and she'd just broken up with her boyfriend of 8 months. Cameron something, I can't even remember his last name now. She was devastated, she said, heartbroken. She couldn't bear the thought of sitting through a party watching everyone celebrate while she was falling apart inside. Could we maybe postpone it? She'd asked, sitting on my bed in my childhood room. Just for a week or two, until I'm feeling better. I promise I'll be fine by then, and then we can really celebrate properly. I looked at her tear-stained face and felt that familiar tug of guilt. She was my little sister, and she was hurting. What kind of person would I be to force her to sit through a party when she was in pain? So I called Mom and asked if we could push the graduation party back. Mom seemed relieved, actually. That's so thoughtful of you, honey. Olivia's been having such a hard time, and this will give her a chance to recover. We'll do something even better in a few weeks. A few weeks turned into a month, then 2 months. By the time Olivia was ready to celebrate my graduation, I was already 2 months into my new job, and the momentum had passed. We never did have that party. Instead, Mom took us out to dinner at Olive Garden, and we called it good. I told myself, it didn't matter. Graduation parties were silly anyway. It was just one night, and Olivia had needed me. That's what sisters did for each other. But then there was my 24th birthday. I'd planned a small gathering at my apartment. Nothing elaborate, just pizza and wine with about 10 friends. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. It was the first time I'd felt established enough in my adult life to host something at my own place. The morning of the party, Olivia called me in tears again. This time, she'd been laid off from her job at a boutique downtown. The owner was cutting staff, and she was the newest hire, so she got the axe. She was panicking about rent, about bills, about what she was going to do. I can't be around people right now, she sobbed into the phone. I'm too embarrassed. Everyone's going to ask about work, and I'll have to tell them I got fired. I can't handle it, Maddie. I just can't. Once again, I felt that pull. She wasn't asking me to cancel exactly, but she was making it clear that having the party would hurt her, that my celebration would add to her pain. What if I kept it really small? I suggested. Just Jake and maybe 2 other people? I don't know, she sniffled. I mean, I guess if you really want to, but I probably won't have much fun. I'll probably just bring everyone down. So I canceled. I called my friends, made excuses about not feeling well, and spent my 24th birthday on my couch with Olivia, eating ice cream and watching romantic comedies while she cried about her ex-boss and her uncertain future. Again, I told myself, it was the right thing to do. She needed support, and I was her big sister. That's what family was for. The pattern was getting established, but I still didn't see it clearly. Looking back now, I can trace it through dozens of smaller incidents. The time I gave her my concert tickets because she said she needed something to look forward to after another breakup. The time I let her borrow my car for a week when hers was in the shop, which meant I had to take the bus to work and miss a client meeting. The time I loaned her $800 for rent when she got fired from yet another job, money I never saw again. Each time it was presented as a crisis. Each time she needed me to step up, to sacrifice, to understand that her needs were more urgent than mine. And each time I did it because I loved her, and because I thought that's what good sisters did. But the wedding dress situation made me realize something I'd been too close to see before. It wasn't that Olivia was unlucky, or that she just happened to have a lot of crises. It was that she'd learned to weaponize her emotions to get what she wanted. The real wake-up call came when I started thinking about what had happened at other people's important events. Take my brother Marcus's wedding 3 years ago. Olivia had volunteered to help with the planning, which seemed sweet at first. But every decision became about her. The bridesmaid dresses weren't flattering on her. Body type. The venue didn't photograph well for her Instagram. The date conflicted with a music festival she wanted to attend. She didn't ask Marcus to change the date, but she made sure everyone knew about the conflict. She sighed about it constantly. She talked about how much she was going to miss the festival, how this was supposed to be her big summer adventure, how disappointed she was. By the time the wedding rolled around, Marcus was so stressed about keeping Olivia happy that he barely seemed to enjoy his own day. I remembered watching him at the reception, constantly checking to make sure she was okay, making sure she was having fun, apologizing to her for the things that weren't going exactly as she'd hoped. And Olivia? She spent the entire reception talking about the festival she was missing, showing people videos on her phone of the bands she wanted to see, making it clear to anyone who would listen that she was making a huge sacrifice to be there. The same thing had happened at our cousin, Rachel's baby shower. Olivia had been going through another breakup, and she'd managed to make the entire event about her emotional state. She'd sit in the corner looking tragic, and concerned relatives would keep checking on her instead of focusing on Rachel. When anyone asked how she was doing, she'd tear up and talk about how hard it was to watch everyone else's happiness when she was feeling so alone. Rachel later told me that she'd felt guilty for being happy about her pregnancy at her own baby shower. Her joy felt selfish when Olivia was clearly suffering so much. That's when I realized what was really happening. Olivia hadn't just learned to make her problems other people's responsibility, she'd learned to make other people's celebrations about her pain, and I'd been enabling it for years. The wedding dress was just the latest example, but it was also the most egregious. She wasn't content to make my engagement about her single status, or my wedding planning about her lack of direction. She literally wanted to take the physical symbol of my wedding and use it for her own purposes. "It's just fabric," she'd said. But what she really meant was, "Your special things aren't that special. Your important moments aren't that important. What I need is always more urgent than what you want." I started scrolling through my phone, looking at photos from the past few years. In every single picture from every celebration, there was Olivia looking either bored, sad, or distracted. At my engagement party, she'd spent the whole time on her phone, texting some guy she'd met on a dating app. In the photos, I'm beaming, next to Jake, and she's literally turned away from the camera, thumb typing. At Marcus's wedding, there she was in the background of the family photos, arms crossed, looking like she was enduring torture. At our family Christmas gatherings, she managed to look either overdressed and attention-seeking or underdressed and sullen, depending on her mood. But it wasn't just the big events. It was the little things, too. When I got my promotion at work, last year, I'd called to share the good news. Her response? "That's great, Maddie. I'm so stressed about my job situation right now, though. Can I call you back later?" She never called back. When Jake and I bought our first house together, she came to see it once and spent the entire visit pointing out everything that was wrong with it. The kitchen was too small. The backyard needed work. The neighborhood was kind of suburban in a way that made it sound like a character flaw. Even my small successes somehow became about her struggles. When I got my real estate license as a side hustle, she immediately started talking about how she'd always wanted to try real estate but could never afford the classes. When I started running and completed my first 5K, she complained about how she wished she had time to exercise, but her life was too chaotic. Every accomplishment I had was either diminished or turned into a reminder of what she didn't have. The more I thought about it, the clearer the pattern became. Olivia had two modes. Crisis mode, where she needed everyone to stop what they were doing to help her, and victim mode, where she needed everyone to feel sorry for her because of what she was missing or lacking. There was never a third mode where she was just happy for other people, where she could celebrate someone else's joy without making it about her pain, where she could support someone else's dreams without explaining why those dreams weren't available to her. And the family had adapted around this. We'd all learned to manage Olivia's emotions instead of expecting her to manage them herself. We'd learned to make our celebrations smaller, our joys quieter, our needs less important, all to avoid triggering one of her episodes. I thought about the phone calls I'd gotten after the dress incident. Mom asked me to work something out. Marcus asked me to make everyone's life easier. Both of them asked me to solve Olivia's disappointment by giving her what she wanted. No one had called Olivia to suggest she find a different dress. No one had told her that maybe demanding to borrow someone's wedding dress was unreasonable. No one had pointed out that her career opportunity was actually just an Instagram photo shoot with some random photographer she'd met at Starbucks. The family response was to pressure me to cave, just like they always did. Because managing Olivia's emotions had become everyone's job except Olivia's. I looked at my wedding dress hanging in the closet and felt something I'd never felt before when I thought about my sister. Anger. Not the flash of irritation I'd felt during our argument, but deep, settled anger at years of having my moments diminished, my boundaries ignored, and my things treated like they belonged to everyone. The dress was beautiful hanging there in its preservation bag. I'd chosen it carefully, saved for it, deliberately, and loved it completely. It represented everything I was building with Jake, everything I hoped for our future together. And Olivia wanted to wear it for a photo shoot to get more Instagram followers. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to call Olivia to work something out. I wasn't going to find a compromise that gave her some of what she wanted while teaching her that my boundaries were negotiable. I was going to stand my ground. And I was going to start documenting what happened next, because I had a feeling this was just the beginning. The pattern had been set for years, but it was about to be broken, and I was ready for whatever came next. The light bulb moment came at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep, when my phone lit up with a notification. It was Olivia, posting on Instagram at 2 a.m, a photo of herself in what looked like a vintage wedding dress, posed dramatically against a brick wall. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to create your own magic when people won't share theirs. Independent woman. Create your own path, Ainder photo shoot. Blessed." I sat up in bed, heart racing. She'd found another dress. Somehow, somewhere, she'd gotten her hands on a wedding dress for her photo shoot. Which meant this whole dramatic crisis about needing my dress specifically had been completely manufactured. I screenshot the post immediately, my hands shaking with a mixture of anger and vindication. This was proof that she'd never actually needed my dress. Proof that the tears, the guilt trips, the family pressure had all been about control, not necessity. But as I stared at the screenshot, I realized something else. This wasn't going to be enough. If I showed this to my family, Olivia would have an explanation. She'd say she'd been forced to settle for a lesser dress, that her shoot wasn't as good as it could have been, that I'd ruined her opportunity even though she'd managed to salvage something from the wreckage. That's when I knew I needed to start keeping track. Really keeping track. Not just remembering the patterns, but documenting them. I got out of bed and went to my home office. I opened my laptop and created a new folder on my desktop. I titled it Olivia Documentation, and then immediately changed it to Family Dynamics. If anyone ever found it, the second title would seem less targeted, more analytical. I started with the Instagram post, saving the screenshot with the date and timestamp clearly visible. Then I opened a new document and began typing everything I could remember about the dress incident, starting with the exact words she'd used at dinner. "It's just fabric." I typed the phrase and felt my jaw clench. Such a simple dismissal of something. That meant so much to me. But I didn't stop there. I went through my text messages, screenshotting every conversation we'd had about the dress. The initial request, my polite deflection, her increasingly demanding follow-ups. I saved the voicemail. From Mom asking me to reconsider, I screenshot Marcus's text about making everyone's life easier. Then I did something I'd never done before. I started going through old text threads, old emails, old social media posts, looking for patterns. And what I found was stunning. The evidence was everywhere, spread across years of digital communication. I found the email thread from my graduation party, where I'd asked Mom to postpone it and she'd replied, "That's so understanding of you, honey. Olivia needs us right now." I found the texts from my birthday, where Olivia had sent me crying selfies, with captions like, "Can't stop crying" and "Worst day ever," until I'd finally canceled my plans. I found Instagram posts from Marcus's wedding where Olivia had shared stories about the music festival she was missing, complete with screenshots of the lineup and sad face emojis. I found Facebook comments on my engagement announcement where she'd managed to make every congratulatory post about her own single status. "So happy for you. Being single is so hard sometimes, but seeing love like this gives me hope." Every single comment managed to center her experience while appearing supportive on the surface. But the most damning evidence came from her own social media. I spent hours going through her Instagram, her Facebook, her Twitter, looking at how she presented herself to the world versus how she presented herself to family. To the world, she was confident, independent, living her best life. Her Instagram was full of inspirational quotes about being strong and self-sufficient. "I don't need anyone's validation to shine. Creating my own opportunities. Living authentically in a world full of copies." But to the family, she was constantly in crisis, constantly needing support, constantly on the verge of falling apart without our help. The contradiction was stark. The girl posting about independence and self-sufficiency was the same girl who'd spent years making her problems everyone else's responsibility. I found posts from the same week she'd been crying to me about her job loss, where she was out at bars with friends, looking perfectly happy and carefree. I found vacation photos from the same month she'd claimed to be too broke to afford rent and had needed to borrow money from me. The most revealing discovery came when I looked at the dates more carefully. Every single family crisis she'd had corresponded with someone else's good news or celebration. Her devastating breakup that ruined my graduation party had happened the week after I'd gotten my job offer. Her job loss that canceled my birthday had occurred 3 days after I'd gotten a promotion. Even her request for my wedding dress had come just 2 days after I'd posted about finalizing our venue, when the wedding was starting to feel real and imminent. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a strategy. I sat back in my desk chair, staring at the timeline I'd created. The pattern was so clear it was almost mathematical. Happy event for Madison equals crisis for Olivia equals family resources. Redirected to manage Olivia's crisis. My phone buzzed. Another Instagram notification. Olivia had posted a second photo from her mysterious photo shoot. This time she was holding a bouquet of peonies, looking wistfully off camera. The caption read, "Had to make some compromises on my vision, but sometimes that's what makes art more authentic. Resilience, make it yourself." I screenshot this one too, adding it to my growing collection. Even in victory, she was playing the victim. But I wasn't done. I opened my banking app and started going through old transactions. Every loan I'd given her, every time I'd paid for dinner because she was between jobs, every gift I'd bought her because she was going through a rough time. I screenshot each transaction, noting the dates and the reasons she'd given for needing help. The numbers were staggering. Over the past 3 years, I'd given or loaned Olivia over $4,000, more than I'd spent on my wedding dress. And I'd never asked for a single penny back because she'd always been in some kind of crisis that made it impossible for her to repay me. I looked at the dates of these transactions too. They clustered around my good news. My promotion had been followed by her needing $500 for car repairs. My engagement had been followed by her needing $800 for rent. My house purchase had been followed by her needing $600 for an emergency dental procedure. It was like she had a radar for my happiness and a corresponding price list for dampening it. I pulled up our family group text and started scrolling back through months of messages. The pattern was there too. Every time I shared, "Good news," Olivia would respond with either silence or a quick subject change to her own problems. When I'd posted photos of my engagement ring, she'd responded with, "Beautiful. BTW, does anyone know a good therapist? Having a rough time lately." When I'd shared pictures of the house Jake and I had bought, she'd replied, "Nice. I wish I could afford to buy anything. Being single is so expensive." When I'd posted about getting my real estate license, she'd immediately followed up with, "Speaking of real estate, I might get evicted next month if I can't figure out this rent situation." Every celebration became a crisis management session, but what was even more telling was how the family responded. Instead of celebrating with me and then separately addressing Olivia's issues, they would immediately shift focus to her problems. My engagement photos got 3 comments, but Olivia's cry for help got 15, including offers of money, therapy recommendations, and invitations to stay with various family members. I was starting to understand that this wasn't just about Olivia's behavior. This was about a family system that had trained itself to prioritize crisis over celebration, drama over joy, problems over progress, and I'd been a willing participant for years. I thought about all the times I'd downplayed my own good news to avoid triggering one of Olivia's episodes. The promotion I'd mentioned casually instead of celebrating properly. The engagement I'd announced quietly instead of throwing a party. The house purchase I'd shared with apologies about how lucky I was instead of pride in how hard I'd worked. I'd learned to make myself smaller to make room for her crises. But the wedding dress was different. The wedding dress was mine in a way that nothing else had ever been. It was the one thing I'd chosen purely for myself, saved for deliberately, and loved completely. And when she'd demanded it, something inside me had finally said no. I looked at the clock. It was almost 4 a.m., and I'd been documenting for 2 hours. My laptop screen was full of evidence, screenshots, timelines, and financial records. It was overwhelming to see it all laid out like this, to see the scope of the manipulation I'd been blind to for years. But it was also liberating. For the first time, I had proof that I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't being oversensitive or selfish or dramatic. There was a pattern, and it was real, and it was documented. I created one more folder and labeled it Wedding Dress Incident. Into this folder, I saved everything related to the current crisis. The text messages, the voicemails, the Instagram posts, the family pressure, all of it. Then I opened a new document and started typing a timeline of events, starting with Olivia's initial request at dinner and ending with her mysterious photoshoot posts at 2 a.m. I included direct quotes wherever possible, exact dates and times, and my own observations about the family's responses. When I was finished, I had a 12-page document that told the complete story of how my sister had tried to manipulate me into giving her my wedding dress, how the family had pressured me to comply, and how she'd ultimately gotten what she wanted. Anyway, while still playing the victim, I saved the document and closed my laptop. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten with the first hints of dawn. I felt exhausted, but also strangely energized. For years, I'd been reacting to Olivia's crises without seeing the bigger picture. I'd been managing symptoms without recognizing the disease. But now, I could see it clearly. And more importantly, I had evidence. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with all this documentation. I wasn't planning to present it to the family like some kind of legal case, but having it felt important. It felt like insurance against future gaslighting, future attempts to make me doubt my own perceptions. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from Mom and a text that said, "We need to talk." My first instinct was the familiar spike of anxiety, the immediate assumption that I'd done something wrong and needed to fix it. But this time, I looked at my laptop sitting closed on the desk, full of evidence and documentation, and I felt something different. I felt prepared. Whatever conversation was coming, I wasn't going into it blind anymore. I had facts, dates, patterns, proof. I had my own voice, backed up by my own research. The awakening was complete. Now it was time to use what I'd learned. The phone call with Mom came at exactly 9 a.m. the next morning, like she'd set an alarm to make sure she caught me before work. I let it ring twice before answering, using those few seconds to pull up the documentation folder on my laptop. Having the evidence right there made me feel steadier somehow. "Madison, honey, we really need to discuss what happened with Olivia," Mom said without preamble. Her voice had that careful, measured tone she used when she was trying to manage a family situation. "She's very upset, and I think there might be a way to work this out that makes everyone happy." "What kind of way?" I asked, genuinely curious to see what compromise she'd come up with. "Well, I was thinking, what if she only borrowed the dress for a couple of hours? She could pick it up in the morning, do her photo session, and have it back to you by dinner time. That way you'd know exactly where it was the whole time." I looked at my computer screen, at the screenshot of Olivia's Instagram post from the middle of the night, the one where she was wearing a different wedding dress entirely, captioned with passive-aggressive comments about creating her own magic when people won't share theirs. "Mom," I said carefully, "did you see Olivia's Instagram last night?" There was a pause. "Her Instagram?" "No, honey, I don't really keep up with social media." "Why?" I clicked on the screenshot, studying Olivia's face in the photo. She looked perfectly happy, not at all like someone whose opportunity had been ruined by her selfish sister. She did the photo shoot anyway. She found another dress and did the whole thing. She posted the pictures at 2 in the morning. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "What?" Mom finally said. "She did the photo shoot, Mom, with a different dress. So this whole crisis about needing my dress specifically was never real. She had other options the entire time." Another long pause. Then, "Well, maybe she had to settle for something that wasn't as nice. Maybe her vision was compromised. You know how important this photography opportunity was to her." I felt that familiar tug, the automatic impulse to feel guilty for disrupting Olivia's plans. But this time, I had evidence to counter the guilt. "Her vision seems pretty intact to me," I said, pulling up the second post. She posted again an hour later about how making compromises made her art more authentic. She didn't sound disappointed at all. "Madison," Mom's voice took on a sharper edge, "I don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this. It's not like you to be ungenerous with your family." Ungenerous. The word hit like a slap. After years of canceled celebrations, redirected attention, and thousands of dollars in unreturned loans, I was being called ungenerous for refusing to hand over my wedding dress. "Mom, I've been very generous with Olivia over the years. Maybe too generous." "What's that supposed to mean?" I opened my banking app and looked at the transaction history I'd compiled the night before. "It means I've loaned her over $4,000 in the past 3 years, and I've never seen a penny of it back. It means I've canceled my own birthday parties and graduation celebrations to manage her emotional crises. It means I've spent years making myself smaller to make room for her drama. Those weren't dramas, Madison. Those were legitimate problems that she needed help with. Were they? Because every single one of her emergencies happened right after I had good news to share. Every breakup, every job loss, every financial crisis. Perfectly timed to overshadow whatever I was celebrating. Mom was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was cooler. I think you're reading too much into coincidences. Olivia has had a harder time than you have. She's struggled more. Sometimes she needs extra support. And what about what I need, Mom? You've always been the strong one, Madison. You've always been able to handle things on your own. Olivia is more sensitive. Sensitive. Another word that made my jaw clench. Olivia wasn't sensitive, she was strategic. But pointing that out would just make me sound cruel. I'm not asking Olivia to handle anything on her own, I said. I'm just asking her to handle her photo shoot without my wedding dress, which she apparently already has. Fine, Mom said, and I could hear the frustration creeping into her voice. But I hope you're prepared for the consequences of this decision. Olivia feels very rejected right now, and I don't know how long it's going to take her to get over this. The threat was subtle, but clear. Keep Olivia happy, or deal with the fallout of her unhappiness. It was the same choice I'd been given my entire adult life. I'll take that risk, I said. After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone for a long time. The conversation had gone exactly as I'd expected, but somehow it still hurt. Mom hadn't asked how I was feeling about any of this. She hadn't acknowledged that Olivia's behavior might be unreasonable. She hadn't even seemed curious about the Instagram posts that proved Olivia had never actually needed my dress. Instead, she'd immediately jumped into damage control mode, trying to find a way to give Olivia what she wanted while making me feel guilty for withholding it. That afternoon, I decided to test something. I called Marcus. Hey, what's up? He answered, sounding distracted. I could hear kids in the background and the sound of what might have been a dishwasher running. I wanted to ask you something about the Olivia situation, I said. Did you know? She ended up doing the photo shoot anyway? With a different dress? She did? When? Last night. She posted the pictures on Instagram. She looked perfectly happy. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Huh. That's weird. When she called me yesterday, she made it sound like her whole opportunity was ruined because you wouldn't let her borrow your dress. She called you yesterday? Yeah, she was crying. Said she didn't know what she was going to do, that this photographer was expecting high-end bridal wear, and she had nothing to offer him. She asked if Jenny had anything she could borrow, but Jenny's dress is a completely different style. I felt a spike of anger. While I was being painted as the villain who had ruined Olivia's opportunity, she was already working on Plan B, calling other family members to see what they might provide. Did she ask to borrow Jenny's dress specifically? I asked. Not exactly. She asked if we had anything formal she could use. When I mentioned Jenny's wedding dress, she kind of dismissed it, said it wasn't the right aesthetic for what the photographer was looking for. But my dress was? Apparently. She went on and on about how perfect yours was, how it was exactly what she needed, how disappointed she was that you were being so inflexible. Inflexible. Another word to add to my growing collection. Marcus, can I ask you something? Do you think it's normal for someone to expect to borrow their sister's wedding dress for a photo shoot? He was quiet for a long moment. I mean, it's a big ask. But you guys are close, right? And it's not like you're getting married tomorrow or anything. Would you let Olivia borrow Jenny's dress for a photo shoot? That's different. Jenny would have to make that call, not me. But if she asked your opinion? Another pause. Honestly? Probably not. Jenny's dress means a lot to her. It's not really something you loan out casually. Then why is it different? When it's my dress? I could practically hear Marcus thinking, I don't know. I guess I figured you might be more flexible about stuff like that. Why would you think that? Because you usually are. You're usually the one who helps out when someone needs something. You're the accommodating one. The accommodating one. The helpful one. The one who could always be counted on to make sacrifices for the greater good of family harmony. What if I don't want to be accommodating about this? I asked. Then I guess that's your choice, Marcus said. But he sounded uncertain. Look, Maddie, I don't want to get in the middle of this. But Olivia seemed really upset, and Mom seems really worried about family relationships getting damaged over this. Maybe there's a compromise somewhere? She already found a compromise, Marcus. She did the photo shoot with a different dress and posted about how authentic it was. The crisis is over. Then why is everyone still upset? That was the question. Wasn't it? If Olivia had solved her problem and gotten what she needed, why was the family still in crisis management mode? I thought I knew the answer. This wasn't really about the dress, and it never had been. It was about maintaining the established order. It was about keeping me in my designated role as the accommodating one, the helper, the sister who could always be counted on to sacrifice her own preferences for Olivia's needs. By saying no and sticking to it, I'd disrupted the system. And now everyone was scrambling to get things back to normal. That evening, Jake came home to find me sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, surrounded by printed screenshots and bank statements. "What's all this?" he asked, setting down his work bag and looking at the papers scattered across the table. "Evidence," I said. "Documentation of a pattern I've been blind to for years." He sat down across from me and picked up one of the printed Instagram posts. It was the one from the night before, showing Olivia in her mystery wedding dress. "She found another dress," he said. "She found another dress," I confirmed. After a week of family drama about how she desperately needed mine. Jake studied the photo. "She looks happy. She looks perfectly fine. Not at all like someone whose opportunity was ruined by her selfish sister." He set the photo down and looked at the other papers. Bank statements showing loan after loan. Screenshots of text conversations showing crisis after crisis. A timeline I'd created showing the correlation between my good news and Olivia's emergencies. "This is a lot," he said finally. "It's years' worth of manipulation that I never saw clearly until now." Jake was quiet for a moment, studying the timeline. "You know what's interesting? Look at the dates around our engagement." I looked where he was pointing. 2 days after I'd posted our engagement photos, Olivia had posted about needing therapy. 4 days later, she'd asked for money for rent. A week after that, she'd called a family meeting to discuss her life direction crisis. Our entire engagement period was overshadowed by Olivia's problems, I said, realizing it for the first time. "And now she wants to overshadow our wedding with her photo shoot," Jake said quietly. He was right. The wedding dress wasn't just about a piece of clothing. It was about Olivia inserting herself into our wedding narrative, making our marriage celebration partly about her Instagram brand. "What are you going to do with all this?" Jake asked, gesturing to the documentation. "I don't know yet, but I'm not letting this go back to normal. I'm not going back to being the accommodating one who sacrifices her own happiness to keep everyone else comfortable." Jake reached across the table and took my hand. "Good. You've been accommodating long enough." That night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. The first direct communication I'd received from her since the dinner table confrontation. "Hope you're happy. The dress I had to use wasn't nearly as nice as yours would have been. My photos didn't turn out the way I envisioned because I had to compromise my artistic vision. Thanks for nothing." I screenshot the message and saved it to my documentation folder. Then I typed back, "I saw your posts. You looked beautiful and happy. Congratulations on a successful shoot." I didn't apologize. I didn't offer to make it up. To her. I didn't take responsibility for her disappointment. For the first time in my adult life, I let Olivia's unhappiness be her own problem to solve. The response came immediately. Whatever. Don't expect me to be excited about your wedding. I looked at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, I expect you to decide for yourself how you want to show up for family events. That's your choice to make. And then I turned off my phone. The first stand was complete. And surprisingly, the world hadn't ended. Olivia was unhappy, Mom was worried, and Marcus was confused. But none of that was actually my responsibility to fix. For the first time in years, I went to sleep without carrying the weight of someone else's emotional crisis. It felt like freedom. The family dinner invitation came 3 days after my text exchange with Olivia. Mom called it a family meeting to clear the air and move forward, together. The timing wasn't coincidental. It was exactly 1 week after Olivia's photo shoot, which meant everyone had had enough time to process what had happened, but not enough time to forget about it. I almost didn't go. The old me would have shown up with apologies prepared, ready to smooth things over and restore family harmony. But sitting in my living room, looking at the folder of documentation I'd assembled, I realized I had a choice. I could either go to this dinner as the accommodating sister who needed to make amends, or I could go as someone with evidence and a voice. I chose the latter. Jake offered to come with me for moral support, but I declined. This needed to be between me and my family. However, I did something I'd never done before. I loaded all my documentation onto my phone and brought printed copies of the most important pieces in a manila folder. If this was going to be a confrontation, I was going to be prepared. The dinner was at my parents' house, just like the one that had started this whole situation. But this time, the atmosphere was different from the moment I walked in. Mom was overly cheerful in that way, which meant she was nervous. Dad was quieter than usual, hovering around the edges of conversations like he was afraid to get too involved. Marcus and Jenny were there, along with their kids, but even the children seemed to sense the tension, because they were unusually subdued. And then there was Olivia. She was dressed up more than usual, wearing a flowing maxi dress and the kind of layered jewelry that suggested she'd put thought into her appearance. Her hair was styled, her makeup was perfect, and she had that serene, slightly martyred expression that she wore when she wanted everyone to know she was being gracious, under difficult circumstances. "Madison," she said when I walked into the living room, her voice warm but carefully controlled. "I'm so glad you came. I was worried you might not." It was a masterful opening move. In one sentence, she'd positioned herself as the gracious sister who'd been uncertain about my willingness to participate in family reconciliation. She'd made me seem like the one who might have been difficult or unwilling to engage. "Of course I came," I said, taking a seat on the couch across from her. "I'm curious to hear what everyone has to say." Mom immediately jumped in with the peacemaking script she'd clearly prepared. "Well, I think we can all agree that this situation got out of hand. There were misunderstandings on both sides, and probably some things said that we all regret. The important thing is that we're family, and we love each other, and we can work through this." "What misunderstandings?" I asked. The question seemed to catch her off guard. "Well, I think maybe there was some miscommunication about expectations." What expectations were miscommunicated? Olivia leaned forward slightly, her expression patient and slightly sad. "Madison, I think maybe you didn't understand how important this opportunity was to me. I think if you had really understood, you might have made a different choice." "Help me understand," I said. "What was important about it?" "The photographer is really well connected in the industry. This could have been my big break. The photos could have opened doors for me, could have launched my whole career as an influencer. But the quality of the final product suffered because I had to compromise on wardrobe." I pulled out my phone and opened her Instagram. "Are these the photos you're talking about?" I asked, turning the screen toward her. She glanced at the phone, and for just a second, her composed expression flickered. Yes, but they have over 2,000 likes, I said, looking at the metrics. Your follower count has gone up by 300 people since you posted them. The comments are all positive. People are asking where you got the dress, where the shoot was taken, who the photographer was. How exactly did the quality suffer? Olivia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The dress wasn't what I originally envisioned. The aesthetic wasn't as cohesive as it could have been. But you posted about how compromises made your art more authentic, I said, scrolling to her caption. You said, and I quote, "Sometimes, the unexpected turns out better than the planned." The room had gone very quiet. I looked around and saw that everyone was staring at me with varying degrees of surprise. This wasn't how these family meetings usually went. Usually I listened to everyone else's perspectives, apologized for my part in the conflict, and agreed to do better in the future. Madison, Mom said carefully, I think what Olivia is trying to say is that she wishes things had gone differently. I wish things had gone differently too, I said, but not for the reasons you might think. I opened the manila folder I'd brought and pulled out a printed copy of Olivia's text to me. The one where she'd said, "Thanks for nothing," and told me not to expect her to be excited about my wedding. This is the text Olivia sent me after her photo shoot, I said, placing it on the coffee table where everyone could see it. Does this sound like someone who's disappointed about compromised artistic vision? Or does it sound like someone who's angry that she didn't get what she wanted? Olivia's cheeks flushed slightly. I was upset. I'd had to scramble to find an alternative, and I was frustrated. You were upset that I didn't give you my wedding dress for your Instagram photos, I said matter-of-factly. That's not how I would put it. How would you put it? She looked around the room, clearly hoping someone would jump in to redirect the conversation. When no one did, she took a breath and seemed to reset herself. I would put it as asking my sister for help with something important to me and being surprised when she said no. Have I ever said no to you before? I asked. What do you mean? I pulled out another sheet of paper. This one was a list I'd made of every time I could remember Olivia asking me for something over the past 3 years. The graduation party postponement, the birthday cancellation, the loans, the favors, the last-minute babysitting, the rides to the airport, the emotional support during her various crises. I mean, in the past 3 years, can you think of a single time I've said no when you asked me for something? Olivia stared at the list, her composed expression starting to crack. I don't keep track of things like that. I do, I said. Because I started wondering why this time felt different. Why were you all so surprised that I said no to this particular request? I pulled out the bank statement printouts showing the loans I'd given her. $4,300, I said, setting them on the table. That's how much money I've loaned you in the past 3 years, none of which has been paid back. Madison, Dad said suddenly, his voice sharp with warning. This isn't appropriate. What's not appropriate about it? I asked, genuinely curious. We're having a family meeting to discuss expectations and misunderstandings. These are relevant facts. You're embarrassing, Olivia, Mom said. Olivia embarrassed herself when she called me selfish for not handing over my wedding dress. I'm just providing context. I pulled out the timeline I'd created, showing the correlation between my good news and Olivia's crises. Here's something else interesting. Every major emotional crisis Olivia has had in the past 3 years has happened within a week of me sharing good news. My job promotion, my engagement, buying my house, getting my real estate license. Like clockwork. The room was dead silent now. Olivia was staring at the papers on the table like they were evidence in a criminal trial, which, in a way, they were. What are you suggesting? Marcus asked quietly. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. The pattern is clear. Every time I have something to celebrate, Olivia has a crisis that requires family attention and resources. Every time. That's a coincidence, Olivia said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? I asked. Because the timing is remarkably consistent, and the family response is remarkably predictable. My celebrations get shortened or canceled, everyone's attention shifts to managing Olivia's crisis, and I end up either providing money, emotional support, or both. I pulled out my phone again and showed them the Instagram posts Olivia had made about independence and self-sufficiency, contrasted with the text messages she'd sent me about needing help and being unable to cope. To the world, Olivia presents herself as strong and independent. To the family, she presents herself as constantly in need of rescue. Which version is real? Both, Olivia said, her voice barely above a whisper. Both? Both are real. I am independent, but sometimes I need help. There's nothing wrong with needing help from family. You're right, I said. There's nothing wrong with needing help, but there's something wrong with manufacturing crises to get attention. There's something wrong with timing your emergencies to overshadow other people's celebrations. And there's definitely something wrong with calling someone selfish for saying no to unreasonable requests. It wasn't unreasonable, Olivia said, her composure finally cracking completely. It was one dress for one afternoon. You're not even getting married for months. It would have been sitting in your closet doing nothing. It's my dress, I said, simply. I don't need a reason beyond that to say no. But we're family, she exploded. Family helps each other. Family shares. I've been sharing for 3 years, I said, gesturing to the papers on the table. I've shared my money, my time, my celebrations, my attention. I've shared everything except my wedding dress. And suddenly I'm selfish. Jenny spoke up for the first time. Madison, I think what everyone's trying to say is that this seems like a small thing to damage family relationships over. I looked at her, this woman who had married into our family and had no idea what the dynamics had been before she arrived. Jenny, would you let Olivia borrow your wedding dress for a photo shoot? She looked uncomfortable. That's different. My dress is, it's special to me. So is mine. But you and Olivia are sisters. So? She clearly didn't have an answer to that. I looked around the room at my family, these people who had spent years enabling Olivia's behavior without even realizing they were doing it. They were all staring at me like I'd become a stranger, like the accommodating sister they'd known had been replaced by someone they didn't recognize. And maybe she had been. Here's what I've realized, I said, gathering up my papers. This family has trained itself to prioritize crisis over celebration, drama over joy, problems over progress. You've all gotten so used to managing Olivia's emotions that you've forgotten other people have emotions too. That's not fair, Mom said. Isn't it? When was the last time any of you asked how I was doing? When was the last time anyone in this family celebrated my successes without immediately shifting focus to Olivia's problems? When was the last time I got to have a moment that was just about me? The silence that followed was answer enough. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, I said, standing up, but I'm not going to keep sacrificing my own happiness to maintain this dysfunctional system. I'm not going to keep making myself smaller to make room for manufactured drama. So what? Olivia said, tears streaming down her face. You're just going to cut us all off? You're going to ruin our family over a dress? I'm not ruining anything. I'm just not fixing it anymore. There's a difference. I walked toward the door, then turned back one more time. For what it's worth, Olivia, your photoshoot pictures were beautiful. You looked happy and confident and successful. You didn't need my dress to shine. You never did. As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in years. The confrontation had been difficult, but it had also been necessary. For the first time, I'd spoken my truth without worrying about managing everyone else's reactions. My phone buzzed with texts from various family members as I drove, but I didn't look at them. Whatever they had to say could wait. I'd said what I needed to say, and now it was up to them to decide how they wanted to respond. The family system was broken, but I wasn't responsible for fixing it anymore. I was only responsible for deciding how I wanted to show up going forward. And I'd decided to show up as myself, boundaries intact, voice clear, evidence in hand. It felt like a revolution. The first 24 hours after the family confrontation were the longest I'd experienced in years, not because I regretted what I'd said, but because I was waiting for the fallout. I'd disrupted a family system that had been operating the same way for decades, and I knew there would be consequences. They started arriving the next morning. The first text came from Mom at 7:23 a.m. I didn't sleep all night thinking about yesterday. We need to talk privately. This can't be how our family ends up. Followed by Marcus at 8:15 a.m. Jenny and I talked for hours last night. I think I'm starting to understand some of what you were saying, but Olivia is really struggling right now. Can we find a middle ground? But the most telling message came from Dad at 10:30 a.m. Just 4 words. You were right, kiddo. That text hit me harder than all the others combined. Dad had been the silent observer for years, the one who stayed out of family drama and let Mom manage the emotional landscape. For him to take a side, especially my side, meant something significant had shifted. By noon, I had 17 text messages, 3 voicemails, and 2 missed calls. Everyone wanted to talk, to explain, to process, to find a way forward. The accommodating sister who had disappeared would have spent the day fielding these communications, trying to smooth things over and make everyone feel better. Instead, I turned off my phone and went wedding dress shopping with Jake. It sounds petty, but it wasn't meant to be. We'd had this appointment scheduled for weeks to look at accessories and shoes, and I wasn't going to cancel my life because my family was having a crisis about my boundaries. Besides, after years of having my celebrations interrupted or overshadowed, it felt revolutionary to prioritize my own joy. The bridal boutique was the same one where I'd bought my dress 18 months earlier. The sales associate, Rebecca, remembered me and asked how the wedding planning was going. It's going well, I said, trying on a pair of pearl earrings that caught the light beautifully. We've had some family drama recently, but we're working through it. Family drama around weddings is so common, she said sympathetically. Everyone has opinions about everything: the dress, the venue, the guest list. It can be overwhelming. Someone wanted to borrow my wedding dress for a photo shoot, I said, not sure why I was sharing this with a stranger. Rebecca's expression changed immediately. Oh no, please tell me you said no. I did say no, but it caused a lot of problems. Of course you said no, she exclaimed, pulling out a matching bracelet for me to try. Do you know how many brides come in here heartbroken because something happened to their dress? Wine stains, tears, mysterious marks that won't come out. Your wedding dress isn't a costume piece. It's a symbol of one of the most important days of your life. Her validation felt like a warm hug. For weeks, I'd been made to feel like I was being unreasonable, selfish, overly precious about just fabric. But here was a professional who dealt with wedding dresses every day, and she was horrified at the very suggestion. The person who asked said it was just fabric, I admitted. Rebecca actually gasped. Just fabric? A wedding dress is never just fabric. It's dreams and hopes and months of planning. It's the culmination of every little girl's princess fantasies and every woman's vision of her perfect day. Someone who would call it just fabric doesn't understand what it represents, and they definitely shouldn't be trusted with it. Jake squeezed my hand. That's what I've been trying to tell you. As we left the boutique, I felt more confident in my decision than ever. The people who understood the significance of wedding dresses supported my choice. The people who didn't understand were the ones pressuring me to compromise. I turned my phone back on during the drive home and found that the messages had multiplied. But now there was a new thread from Olivia herself. A long, rambling text that had clearly been composed and rewritten multiple times. Madison, I've been thinking a lot about yesterday, and I want you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I know you think I've been manipulative, but I swear that's not how I see it. I struggle sometimes, and you've always been there for me, and I guess I started to expect that instead of appreciating it. I don't know how to deal with problems the way you do. You're so strong and capable, and I'm just not. But I can see, now that I've been unfair to you, and I'm sorry. I don't want to lose my sister over this. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever received from Olivia, but something about it still felt off. She was acknowledging the impact of her behavior without taking full responsibility for the behavior itself. She was positioning herself as struggling and incapable rather than strategic and manipulative, and she was still playing the victim, just in a more subtle way. But what struck me most was the last line. I don't want to lose my sister over this. As if I were the one threatening to end our relationship by refusing to enable her anymore. Showed the text to Jake when we got home. What do you think? I asked. He read it twice before responding. I think it's progress, but I also think she's still not taking full responsibility. She's sorry for the impact, not for the choices that led to the impact. That's what I thought too. What are you going to do? I thought about it for a long time. The old me would have accepted this partial apology gratefully and used it as an excuse to go back to the way things were. But the new me, the one with evidence and boundaries, knew better. I texted back, I appreciate you reaching out. I think we both need some time to process what happened and figure out how we want to move forward. I love you, but I also need to protect my own peace. Her response came immediately. What does that mean? It means I'm not going back to the way things were. It means going forward, I'm going to make decisions based on what's healthy for me, not what's easiest for everyone else. So you're punishing me. And there it was. Even in her apology, even when she was supposedly taking responsibility, she still couldn't accept that I might have legitimate reasons for changing the dynamic. My boundary setting was punishment, not self-protection. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just not fixing everything anymore. She didn't respond to that. The next few weeks brought a series of revelations about how the family was adjusting to my changed role. Marcus called to tell me that Olivia had asked him for money to cover her rent, the same rent she'd claimed to be behind on when she'd borrowed $800 from me 6 months earlier. I told her I couldn't help, he said. Jenny and I talked about it, and we realized we don't actually know what her financial situation is. She always seems to have money for new clothes and dinners out, but then she's always broke when it comes to necessities. What did she say when you said no? She cried, said she didn't understand why everyone was turning against her all at once, said she felt like the family was falling apart. And I felt bad, but I also realized that feeling bad isn't a good enough reason to make financial decisions. You were right about the patterns, Madison. Once I started looking for them, they were obvious. Mom's adjustment was more complicated. She called me a week after the confrontation, clearly having rehearsed what she wanted to say. I've been thinking about our conversation, she began, and I want you to know that I never intended to favor Olivia over you. She's always needed more help, and you've always been so capable of handling things on your own. But did you ever consider that maybe I needed help too? Maybe I just wasn't as vocal about it? There was a long pause. I suppose I didn't. I suppose I assumed that if you needed something, you'd ask. I did ask, Mom. I asked for my graduation party not to be canceled. I asked for my birthday celebration to be allowed to happen. I asked for my engagement to be celebrated without immediately shifting focus to Olivia's problems. I asked in lots of ways, just not directly. I didn't see it that way at the time. I know you didn't. That's the problem. The conversation was awkward and stilted, but it was also honest in a way our family conversations rarely were. Mom was trying to understand, even if she wasn't quite there yet. But the most surprising change came from Dad. He started calling me regularly, something he'd never done before. Not about family drama or crisis management, but just to chat. To ask about work, about the wedding planning, about Jake's new project at work. I realize I don't know much about your actual life, he said during one of these calls. I know about your problems when you have them, but I don't know about your joys. That seems backwards. It does seem backwards, I agreed. Tell me about the wedding planning. What's been the best part so far? It was such a simple question, but it brought tears to my eyes. No one in my family had ever asked me what was making me happy about my wedding. They'd asked about logistics, about stress, about conflicts, but never about joy. I told him about finding the perfect venue, about Jake's reaction when he saw me in the dress for the first time, about the florist who understood exactly what I wanted without me having to explain it. Small things that felt enormous when someone actually wanted to hear about them. You sound really happy, he said when I finished. I am really happy. Good. You deserve to be happy. It was the first time in my adult life that a family member had said that to me without any qualifications or conditions attached. The wedding planning itself became easier once I stopped trying to manage everyone else's reactions to my choices. I booked the photographer I loved without worrying about whether Olivia would approve of his style. I chose flowers that made me smile instead of ones that would photograph well for other people's Instagram posts. I sent invitations without agonizing over whether every family member would be completely satisfied with every detail. Most importantly, I stopped preemptively managing potential problems. When Olivia posted cryptically about family changes and disappointing realizations on social media, I didn't call to check on her or offer reassurance. When Mom mentioned that Olivia seemed sad lately, I expressed appropriate concern, but didn't offer to fix it. The old Madison would have seen these signals as emergencies requiring immediate attention. The new Madison recognized them as Olivia's attempts to regain control of the family's emotional energy. It wasn't that I stopped caring about my family. It was that I stopped allowing their emotions to dictate my actions. 6 weeks after the confrontation, I got a text from Olivia that surprised me. It was a photo of a man I didn't recognize, followed by, "Meet Derek. We've been dating for a month. He's taking me to see Hamilton next weekend." It was the first communication from her that wasn't about family drama, crisis, or her disappointment in my choices. It was just normal sister news. I texted back, "He looks nice. Enjoy the show." "Thanks. I'm really excited. I've wanted to see it forever." "That's wonderful. You'll have to tell me how it is." It was a completely ordinary exchange, the kind that normal siblings have all the time. But for us, it felt revolutionary. That evening, Jake found me in the kitchen making dinner, humming while I chopped vegetables. "You seem lighter lately," he observed. "I feel lighter. It's amazing how much energy I was spending on managing everyone else's feelings. Now that I'm not doing that anymore, I have so much more bandwidth for my own life." "Any regrets?" I thought. About it seriously. "No. I miss the illusion of family harmony sometimes, but I don't miss the reality of it. The harmony was fake anyway. It was just everyone agreeing to let Olivia's emotions drive the bus. And now? Now everyone has to drive their own bus. It's messier, but it's more honest. The resolution wasn't the neat, tidy reconciliation that family movies always promise. It was messier and more complicated than that. Some relationships improved. Others remained strained, and some are still working themselves out. But for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't responsible for managing the outcome. I was only responsible for showing up authentically, boundaries intact, voice clear, and that felt like the most important victory of all. 6 months have passed since that family dinner confrontation, and I'm writing this on the morning of my wedding day. In 3 hours, I'll put on the dress that started this whole journey, and Jake and I will say our vows in front of the people who matter most to us. The dress is hanging on the back of my closet door right now, exactly where it's supposed to be, exactly where it's always belonged. The morning light is catching the seed pearls on the bodice, making them shimmer like tiny stars. It's more beautiful than I remembered, and more meaningful than I ever imagined it could be. This isn't just a story about a wedding dress, though. The dress was the catalyst that changed everything. This is a story about learning the difference between helping and enabling, between family loyalty and family dysfunction, between keeping the peace and keeping your peace. The most important lesson I learned is that boundaries aren't walls you build to keep people out. They're guidelines you establish to keep yourself intact. For years, I thought being a good sister, daughter, and family member meant saying yes to everything, sacrificing my own needs, and managing everyone else's emotions. I thought love meant making myself smaller so others could be comfortable. Was wrong. Real love requires honesty, even when that honesty is uncomfortable. Real family support means celebrating each other's successes, not just managing each other's crises. And real relationships can only exist when both people are showing up authentically, not when one person is constantly performing the role of savior or victim. The wedding dress became a symbol of something much larger than fabric and lace. It represented my right to have things that were precious to me without having to justify or share them. It represented my right to say no without being labeled selfish. It represented my right to exist as a whole person with my own needs, wants, and boundaries. When Olivia called it just fabric, she wasn't just dismissing my dress. She was dismissing my right to have preferences, boundaries, and things that mattered to me. She was expressing a worldview where my belongings, my time, my energy, and my emotional resources were essentially communal property that she could access whenever she decided she needed them. The family system had supported this worldview for years without anyone realizing it. Every time I gave in to keep the peace, every time I sacrificed my own needs to meet hers, every time I made myself smaller to accommodate her bigger emotions, I was reinforcing the idea that my boundaries were negotiable and her needs were paramount. Breaking that cycle required more than just saying no to one request. It required a complete shift in how I understood my role in the family and my responsibility for other people's feelings. The documentation I gathered wasn't just evidence of Olivia's manipulation tactics. It was proof that I had been consistently undervaluing my own experiences and overvaluing everyone else's comfort. It was evidence that I had trained my family to see me as the accommodating one, the helper, the sister who would always bend so others didn't have to. But here's what I discovered in the months that followed. When you stop enabling dysfunction, you don't destroy relationships. You reveal them. Some relationships get stronger because they were built on genuine care and mutual respect. Others fall apart because they were only held together by one person's willingness to absorb all the dysfunction. My relationship with Dad deepened in ways I never expected. Once he stopped focusing on managing family drama, he had bandwidth to actually get to know me as a person. We discovered shared interests in history and podcasts. He started asking about my work projects and remembering details from previous conversations. Our relationship transformed from polite distance to genuine connection, and it happened because I stopped being the family problem solver and started being myself. Marcus and I went through a rougher transition, but we came out stronger on the other side. He had to confront his own role in the family dysfunction, his own tendency to pressure me to accommodate Olivia to make his life easier. It wasn't comfortable for either of us, but working through it honestly brought us closer than we'd been since childhood. Mom's adjustment has been the most complex. She's genuinely trying to understand how her parenting choices created the dynamic we all lived with for so long. She started going to therapy to work through her own patterns of conflict avoidance and people-pleasing. Our relationship is still a work in progress, but it's an honest work in progress now. And Olivia? Our relationship looks completely different than it did 6 months ago. The crisis-driven dynamic is gone, which means we had to learn how to relate to each other as actual people rather than as roles in a dysfunctional family play. She still struggles with managing her emotions and taking responsibility for her choices, but she no longer assumes that her struggles automatically become everyone else's emergency. She's learned that I'm not available to be her emotional regulator or financial safety net, and while she didn't like that boundary initially, she's adapted to it. More importantly, she's started building a life that doesn't revolve around manufactured crises. Her relationship with Derek has lasted 7 months now, longer than any relationship she's had in years. She got a job as a social media coordinator for a local nonprofit, work that uses her skills without requiring her to build a personal brand around constant drama. We text regularly now, but the texts are about normal things. Books she's reading, restaurants she's tried, movies she wants to see. We grab coffee occasionally, and our conversations are about her actual interests and experiences, not about whatever emergency she needs me to help solve. It's not the close, sisterly relationship that movies promise, but it's real in a way our old relationship never was. We're learning to know each other as adults, rather than as the roles we played in our family dysfunction. The most profound change, though, has been in how I understand love and loyalty. I used to think that loving someone meant absorbing their pain so they didn't have to feel it. I thought loyalty meant sacrificing my own well-being to maintain family harmony. I thought being supportive meant saying yes to every request and fixing every problem. Now I understand that real love sometimes requires letting people experience the consequences of their choices. Real loyalty sometimes means refusing to enable behavior that isn't serving anyone. Real support sometimes looks like saying, "I believe you're capable of handling this yourself." The people who love me for who I am supported my decision to set boundaries, even when those boundaries were inconvenient for them. The people who loved me for what I provided got angry when I stopped providing it unconditionally. That distinction taught me everything I needed to know about which relationships were worth fighting for and which ones were worth letting go. As I put on my wedding dress this morning, I'm not just getting dressed for my wedding. I'm putting on a symbol of my own self-worth, my own boundaries, my own right to have beautiful things that are mine alone. I'm wearing proof that I can say no to unreasonable requests without being a bad person. I'm wearing evidence that my dreams and celebrations matter just as much as anyone else's crises and emergencies. The dress fits perfectly, just like it did when I first tried it on 18 months ago. But I feel different wearing it now. I feel like someone who knows her own value, someone who can set boundaries without guilt, someone who can love her family without losing herself in the process. For anyone who's reading this and recognizing their own family dynamics, I want you to know that change is possible. It's not easy, and it's not quick, and it definitely isn't comfortable. There will be people who get angry when you stop enabling their dysfunction. There will be guilt and pushback and accusations of selfishness. But there will also be freedom. Freedom from constantly managing other people's emotions. Freedom from sacrificing your own needs to maintain fake harmony. Freedom from making yourself smaller so others can avoid growing up. The most practical advice I can offer is this: start documenting. Not to build a case against anyone, but to clarify the patterns for yourself. When you're in the middle of family dysfunction, it can be hard to see clearly. Everything feels urgent. Everything feels like a one-time emergency. Everything feels like your responsibility to fix. But when you step back and look at the timeline, when you track the requests and the crises and the family responses, the patterns become undeniable. And once you can see the patterns clearly, you can make informed decisions about how you want to respond to them. Second, remember that you can love someone and still set boundaries with them. You can care about someone's well-being without taking responsibility for their emotions. You can be supportive without being available for every crisis. Healthy relationships require two people who can manage their own emotional states while still showing up for each other in genuine emergencies. Third, prepare for pushback. When you stop enabling dysfunction, the people who benefited from that dysfunction will not thank you. They will call you selfish, dramatic, ungenerous, disloyal. They will try to guilt you back into your old role. They will escalate their behavior to test your boundaries. Stand firm anyway. The discomfort of setting boundaries is temporary. The relief of living authentically is permanent. Finally, remember that you cannot control how other people respond to your boundaries. You can only control whether you maintain them. Some people will respect your boundaries and adjust their behavior accordingly. Others will continue to push against them and eventually remove themselves from your life. Both outcomes are okay. Your job is not to keep everyone happy. Your job is to show up as your authentic self and let other people decide how they want to relate to that person. My wedding day turned out to be everything I hoped it would be. The ceremony was beautiful. The celebration was joyful, and I felt completely present for all of it. There was no family drama that needed managing, no crises that required immediate attention, no one's emotions that needed regulating except my own. Olivia came to the wedding, and she looked genuinely happy for us. She didn't make it about herself, didn't create any drama, didn't need any special attention or accommodation. She danced with Derek, complimented my dress without any trace of resentment, and gave a lovely toast about hoping Jake and I would always prioritize our relationship the way I had learned to prioritize myself. It was the sister I had always hoped she could be, and it was only possible because I had stopped enabling the sister she had been. The wedding dress is now hanging in my closet in its preservation box, waiting for some future daughter or daughter-in-law who might want to wear it someday. If that happens, I'll be honored to share it. But if it doesn't, that's okay too. The dress served its purpose just by being mine when I needed it to be mine. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply refuse to negotiate your own worth. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people experience the consequences of their choices. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do is stop giving so much that you lose yourself in the process. Your boundaries are not selfish. Your needs are not negotiable. Your peace is not a sacrifice you owe to anyone else's comfort. And your wedding dress, literal or metaphorical, is yours to keep. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.